Hi, I'm Julie Miller, and today I want to talk about Renzulli's three-ring model of giftedness and why I feel that it is in support of diverse learners. Little history about Joseph Renzulli. He was born in 1936. He was is an American educational psychologist. He graduated with a bachelor's degree from Rowan University in New Jersey. He earned a master in education degree from Rutgers University, and he earned a doctorate from the University of Virginia. And Renzulli spent his lifetime focusing on applying the strategies of gifted education to the improvement of learning for all students. And in the 1970s, he challenged the universal accepted definition of giftedness. He believed that giftedness should be based off of a cluster of behaviors and not solely on an IQ score or another cognitive score. And a fun fact that in 1978, Renzulli wrote a paper titled, "What Makes Giftedness? Re-examining a Definition." And that paper was rejected by three of the most prominent gifted journals of that time. But there was a general education periodical, the Phi Delta Kappan, that agreed to publish the article. And it is now the most widely cited article in gifted education. And Renzulli bases his definition of giftedness on two broad categories. The first one is kind of thought of as a schoolhouse giftedness, and that's they do well at taking tests. They can learn the lessons easily, and that's usually measured solely by an IQ or another cognitive ability test. And then the second category is the creative, productive giftedness. And he talks about how when individuals have unusual or stimulating thoughts, they're referred to as brilliant. And then others have those original thoughts, fresh ideas, they're insightful, and those are known as personally creative. And then others change the culture in an important way. And those are the ones he said that are creative, productive. And he kind of relates it to a basketball player, which I found interesting. And the thought is, would we cut a basketball player who was gifted, great basketball player, because he missed the cutoff height by just 2 inches? Successful coaches would look at the whole individual. They would look at ball handling skills, shooting ability, their speed and their drive. Again, the whole player. And that's kind of what Renzulli is referring to here. We can't just look at one aspect of the child. We have to look at the entire individual. And Renzulli believes that both categories are important and that there is an interaction between both the schoolhouse giftedness and those that are creative, productive, or have creative, productive giftedness. And that schools should provide enrichment for both the schoolhouse gifted and the creative, productive gifted student, and then also provide interaction between the both individuals. And I found this interesting. These were considered creative, productive individuals. Early on, Thomas Edison, his teacher said that he was too stupid to learn anything. Louisa May Alcott, she was told that she could never write anything with popular appeal. And thank goodness she did keep writing. Walt Disney was fired by a newspaper for not having good ideas, but I'm glad he continued with his passion because my daughter currently works for Walt Disney. And Albert Einstein, he did not speak until the age of 4, and he did not read until the age of 7. And he was considered dull by his parents and his teachers. So Renzulli found that research on creative, productive individuals show that one single criteria cannot be used to determine giftedness. Those individuals who achieved recognition because of their unique accomplishments and creative contributions possess the traits of 3 different clusters as seen below in Renzulli's 3-ring theory of giftedness. And I will talk about that more in just a little bit. I do like this quote from Joseph Renzulli. He said that gifted behavior consists of thought and action resulting from an interaction between or among three basic clusters of human traits. These clusters being above average general and or specific abilities, high levels of task commitment, and high levels of creativity. Children who manifest or are capable of developing, which is that's the part that I like, are capable of developing an interaction among the three clusters require a wide variety of educational opportunities, resources, and encouragement above and beyond those ordinarily provided through regular instructional programs. And here's a map of the cluster traits. And so in gifted behaviors, again, we have the above average ability, and that's broken down into the general ability and the specific ability. And general ability is how well one can process information, how well one can integrate knowledge into an experience, abstract thinking, and that remains constant throughout one's lifetime. And then there's also that specific ability, the knowledge to acquire or the ability to acquire knowledge or a skill. And you can think of that as the ability to perform a skill such as a ballet dancer or a composer or someone who is a wonderful chemist. Then the second cluster is creativity, and that is the speed that they can process thoughts. They raise questions others have not thought of, and they have a willingness to experiment in trying new things. And then the third cluster is task commitment, and that is seen through motivation, grit, perseverance, and hard work. And Renzulli feels that creativity and task commitment come and go throughout one's lifetime, and they do kind of feed off of each other. You have a new idea, you thought of something that no one had thought of, and then you're usually a little bit more motivated to kind of work through that to come up with a solution. And these can be developed, and they must be developed through guidance from a teacher or parents or both. And Renzulli believes that these can be enhanced as long as there is interest. And again, interest is a key component in all areas of gifted behaviors. And Renzulli came up with this model where he believes that gifted behaviors can be seen, ICP, in certain people at certain times of their life and within certain contexts, again, within an area of interest. And Renzulli created a program to develop these gifted behaviors in individuals called the Enrichment Triad model. And the Enrichment Triad model is a combination of three different activities. Type 1 activities are those general exploratory activities, and that includes enrichment in the regular classroom, and that's for all students and exposes students to various topics. And then type 2, again, is for all students, and that's where it focuses on creativity, thinking skills, developing skills to learn, communication skills, information retrieval skills. And then type 3, that's where the talent pool kind of comes in, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail in just a moment. But this is the type 3 for those individuals or maybe a single individual or a group of students who want to do some further investigation of real world problems. And then they can come up with projects that benefit their community, whether it's a school community or their neighborhood community. And the talent pool identification plan, what I was referring to before, it's considered to be a flexible 15 to 20% of the school population is identified. And again, that 20, that's not even set. If you're, it might be 21%, or as you'll see as I describe this in a little more detail. Step 1 is solely based off of a test score, and that's 50% of the talent pool. And those students who score above the 92nd percentile are admitted without further evaluation. They're automatically into the talent pool, that step the third step in the Triad model. Step 2 is the teacher nominations. Maybe the teacher's seeing something in the classroom and she wants to nominate a student. Step 3 is an alternative pathway, and maybe the student wants to self-nominate themselves. Maybe they don't understand why their classmate is going to these services when they think they're just as qualified, so they can nominate themselves. A parent can refer them, or a peer can nominate them. And then also creativity tests or product evaluation. And then that's the third step, the alternative pathway. Step 4 is considered to be safety valve number 1. And a student can be nominated by a special nomination by a previous teacher, or possibly a specials teacher, a music teacher, or if they go to a language class, something that those teachers see in them, those students, that they want to nominate those. And again, those are for students who are not on the list, who seem to have strengths in a particular area or are highly creative. And this safety valve eliminates the biases of their current teachers. Maybe there's just a personality conflict or something that's causing that teacher not to see those gifted behaviors. Step 5, again, is a safety valve, and that is the action information nominations. And this is for students who are extremely interested in or excited about an area of study and wish to pursue learning in an independent study. And like I said before, step 1, you're automatically in the talent pool. But steps 2 through 5 depends on the decision of a screening committee. And they interview students, teachers, and parents. They sometimes examine previous school records. And also they sometimes can be admitted on a trial basis. And 5 arguments for using the talent pool method for supporting diverse learners is that it uses test and non-test criteria. Some students just don't do well, or maybe they freeze, they're having a bad day, or they just don't do well on those tests. So they also use the non-test criteria. Another argument for using it is that more students receive opportunities. Some gifts and talents are not measured by tests or easily recognized by teachers. The third argument, teachers look to identify students year-round through different projects. Maybe there was a student has a particular interest in a project and those gifted behaviors really start to shine. The fourth argument is that the charge of elitism is reduced. And lastly, the problem of deciding who is in and who is out, or who is eliminated. The thought is, when in doubt, you admit that student. So that's why that 15 to 20%, that's why it's a flexible plan. It might be 21%. Renzulli differentiates between potential and performance. Individuals could have a remarkable potential for mathematics or ice skating or playing the violin, but until that potential is manifested in a superior performance, Renzulli does not believe gifted behaviors would be displayed. Therefore, Renzulli believes our challenge as educators is to create opportunities for all students to turn potential into performance. So therefore, we must provide students with the concept of OR. And Joseph Renzulli feels the concept of OR is vital to developing these behaviors. We must give students opportunities. We must give students give all students access to resources that they need. And then they need the encouragement from their teachers, from their school environment, from their parents. And again, these opportunities and resources always must be within their interest level. There was some research done on the 3-ring conception of giftedness, and the identification process based on the 3-ring conception and the enrichment triad programming model, and that was done in 1982. And they took a population of 1,162 students in 1st through 6th grade in 11 different school districts. and all the students participated in the same activities. Group A were the students who scored in the top 5% on standardized tests of intelligence and achievement. And then group B were students that scored from 10 to 15 percentile points below group A, below the top 5%. And the results were that there was no significant difference between, oh, sorry about my spelling there, quality of student products when using the enrichment triad model. So these findings are offered as verification of the three-ring conception of giftedness and of support for the effectiveness of the model in serving a group somewhat larger than the traditional 5%, thus reaching more of those diverse learners. I like this quote. It said, "Giftedness does not discriminate. Unfortunately, however, educational opportunities do." And so, oops, sorry about this. So facts regarding diversity among gifted learners. The CLED students are those who are culturally, linguistically, educationally diverse. These students are often unrecognized in the gifted world. And those economically diverse students, poverty is the main reason for their underrepresentation in CLED students. The families and peers typically just don't have the resources to aid in the intellectual and creative talents. They don't have the resources, which include money, experiences, possibly a private psychologist for testing, access to schools with better gifted programs, higher economic status, which there was a study done which meant better communication with students to gain knowledge. And you can read about that in the article from the NAGC. Those culturally diverse, culturally different and economically disadvantaged African American, Hispanic American, Native American, Asian American, and Caucasian children living in large urban areas in underprivileged rural and on Indian reservations are underrepresented in gifted and talented. Their educational needs are generally focused on basic skills, and they're often seen in strict environments with not a lot of leeway in what they can study. It is estimated that by the year 2060, ethnic minorities will make up 51% of the population. So again, if we do not come up with a way to make it more or make the identification process to include the diverse students, it's just going to become more and more spread out. In a 2016 study by Grissom and Redding, researchers found that 1/3 as many Black students were identified by a gifted reading program by non-Black educators as when the identifiers were Black educators. So the National Association for Gifted Children recommend to capture a holistic profile of all students. Multiple criteria should be the norm. Qualitative and quantitative information should be gathered from families, teachers, and students, and that all should be part of the evaluative process. And all instruments used for screening and identification, such as checklists, referral forms, assessments, should be valid, reliable, and culturally and linguistically sensitive. And lastly, on the gender diversity, historically, the education of gifted women have been ignored. Early in the 18th century, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, one of the most influential educators in the 18th century, believed that women's education should be planned in relation to men. And that was the goal, should be to make the man's life more pleasant. So a study in 1992 reported that fewer females are labeled as mathematically gifted than males. The study also stated that females labeled as gifted are less likely to take demanding high school math and science courses or major in math or sciences in college. And then there's a relationship. And also to pursue a career in a math or science related field. Some studies have shown that differential treatment of males and females actually begins at a very early age, starting with parents. In 1974, there was a study that discovered that parents of female children generally do not buy as many mathematical related toys and games as do parents of males, thus putting their female children at a distinct disadvantage when they enter the classroom. Other studies found that parents of female children are more likely to downplay the importance of mathematics, and that was a study done in 1982. Teachers, too, have been found to give differential treatment to males and females. Gifted females are less often encouraged to pursue the study of math and science subjects than males. Some teachers believe that girls tend to be more successful in language arts and that achievement in math and science should be reserved for the boys. And that was a study found in 1984. And to wrap this up, I just kind of summarized and thought Renzulli's three-ring model of giftedness and enrichment triad model using the talent pool identification process decreases the diversity of culturally, economically, and gender in gifted education by, and a few of the ways are, they increase the number of students identified by using the three clusters in the three-ring model. And they look at both behaviors present in students and also at their potential. Or potential in other students. It also increases the number of students who have access to general exploratory activities through the enrichment triad model, and thus possibly increasing interest in some students that they didn't have access to that information prior. Increases the number of students given training in creativity and other thinking skills, learning to learn skills, communication skills, and information retrieval skills. And increased methods, both quantitatively and qualitatively, used for identification to the talent pool. Also increases the size of the gifted population from roughly 5% to 15 to 20%. Again, that's flexible. And it decreases the bias, which is often seen when solely using cognitive scores for identification purposes by including those creative, productive students. Thank you.